All right, guys, welcome. We got Ken Goodrich here and Matt Ballard. Got a long story going. Matt, you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, I'm Matt Ballard. I'm the CEO and owner of Sunrise Mechanical in Las Vegas.
Yeah. Ken?
My name is Ken Goodrich, and I've been in the industry for many years and had many different companies and many different experiences. My last one, though, I was the founder and CEO of Gettle Air Conditioning Plumbing, of which I sold that business in December 2021. And today I serve on the board, as well as now rolling up the standby generator industry in the Southeast.
Yeah. Ken's being modest. That Gettle deal was quite a large sale.
Yeah.
I don't know what I can and can't say about that for non-disclosure agreements, but yeah. And I'm Tom Howard. I've bought and sold a lot of companies and sold one here in Vegas last year, and have 7 or 8 in California right now, and been constantly chasing Ken Goodrich and learning from his stories of acquisitions for a few years now since we met. Yeah, we want to be able to tell these stories of acquisitions. We're actually going to be Ken and I are going to be speaking at Pantheon about acquisitions here at the end of September, and this is going to be an add-on that people can scan a QR code and come and listen to this and get more information about buying and selling businesses and how Ken's been able to do it over the years as well. Anyway, Ken, can you tell us a little bit more about your business background and how you got here and where you came from and what got you into it?
Well, I started in the business holding the flashlight from my dad when I was about 10 years old. And, I worked for him every night, weekend, and summer here in Las Vegas, up on the roofs, and learning the air conditioning trade. By the time I was 16, got my driver's license, I was running service calls, selling air conditioners, installing them. Kind of got into it very, very early. Unfortunately, my dad passed away when I was 25 years old, and I bought the business from my mom, which was, she answered the phone and did the books, and I had one van and I did the work. So that was the business. But bought the business from my mom, and over time, I started to think that I wanted to expand and build a business with employees and ultimately build it big enough so I could sell it and eventually get out, because it's all I'd ever done growing up was this air conditioning thing, and I was kind of thinking about doing some other things. So I made this plan, and I went off to work on it, and I had my struggles, and that's a whole nother story. But I had my struggles, and I eventually figured out what a business was. A business is a system, a set of processes that make an overall business system that delivers the service to the customer, and that's a lot more things than doing the work, the actual air conditioning work, which I'd learned the hard way. But I finally got through it. But in that journey, I had kind of stumbled on this ability to acquire either, close down, bankrupt, or struggling companies, even companies where the founders were retiring, and usually on the smaller side back when I first started. But what I noticed when I acquired these businesses is it gave my business an immediate bump in revenue. And marketing is and building a reputation and customer base and marketing is a long-term proposition. It's the long game, and it's the right game to play. But I got to tell you, I got really addicted to these big boosts of business that you'd get when you'd buy a phone number, a database, and start marketing to these customers, and kind of taking the place of the standing in front of the other owner or founder and taking that role inside that relationship. And the best part about it was immediate boost, and number two, I was usually buying these customer relationships a lot less expensive than I would from traditional marketing. So I started out and I was able to start acquiring businesses. And going back to my story about that I struggled in the beginning, I struggled and I figured out and I created my business system. So I actually was really in a bad way with my own company, but I turned it around. And because I turned it around, I was very comfortable buying broken companies, which, broken companies have, you can usually get them for a lot less expensive.
Yeah.
And really the gem inside the business that I wanted was that database and that relationship with the customer. So I just started in the routine of hunting out and building relationships with everybody I could in the industry, so that one day either they decide to sell the business, they're forced to sell the business, or they want to retire, they had a relationship with me, and I was the first guy standing in line.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I built it. And over time, I was able to build and sell over 27 to 30 branches of HVAC companies, and in 6 transactions that I've done.
How much do you think can you tell us what the total value of those transactions would be if you had to guess? So to give the listeners an idea.
I would,
aggregate?
750 million, maybe, something like that.
That's not a small number, Ken.
Yeah. I got to get, I want to, one of my goals is get to $1 billion in transaction value in my career. So we better hurry up and do something.
I was going to say, how much time left do we have to achieve that goal?
We better get going on it.
Okay. Well, so Ken, tons of transactions. You've been very successful. Can you share a couple transactions that you've done that particularly stand out to you as like significant in that process of learning how to do these?
Sure. So I'll just talk about my first one, which was here in Las Vegas. There was a company called Day and Night, and when I was a kid, they were kind of a bigger operation. And back those days, if you had 5, 6, 7 trucks, you were a big company, considered a big company. So, but the guy had a good residential business, and I went to the supply house one day, and somebody told me, the counter guy said that the owner of Day and Night had just passed away. And so I'm thinking, wonder what's going to happen with the business. And I asked the manager of that supply house, I said, so what's going on with the business? Who's taking it over? And he says, I don't think he has any family or anybody who wants it. So I'm driving back home that night, and I had a brainstorm. I wonder if I could get that phone number. It just kind of came to me. So next day I called the phone company, and I said, I'd like to have this phone number. And they said, oh, that's a business phone number. And the FTC law is that a business has to be shut down. A phone number has to be made available to the old owner for 1 year after it gets cut off. Give them a chance to make up the back payments, because it's a business, and business happens. And so we can't give it out for a year. And I said, well, I assure you this guy's not coming back to get the number, because he just passed away. And they said, so the lady said, well, I can't help you. So I said, can I talk to your supervisor? And talked to the supervisor for a while, and she wouldn't do anything. So I said, can I talk to your supervisor? And I finally got someone to say, okay, look, if you can prove that he died, then we'll give you the number. I'm like, okay, at least I have a challenge. So I leave. I'm like, how do I prove somebody dies? I'm 25 years old. I don't know how you prove someone dies. So I ask around. Someone says, go to the health department and get his death certificate. Costs $6. So I went to the health department, got the death certificate, and drove back to the phone company and gave it to him. And the lady was a little pissy with me, like, darn it, like, I don't know why she didn't want to give me the number, but I performed. So I got the number, and she goes, okay, went in the computer. She said, it's ringing to your office right now. So I go back to my office, and just as I walk in, the phone's ringing. I don't know where my receptionist is, so I pick up the phone, and here's a lady says, is this Day and Night Air? And I said, well, yes, ma'am, it is. Actually, Jerry has passed, and I'm taking over his customers and taking care of all his former customers. How can I help you? She said, oh, no. She said, he gave us this bid for $7,000. Is that still good? I go, well, of course it is. I didn't even know what it was. But it was $7,000. So I said, of course it is. Give me your address. Can I come over now and see what's going on? And so I got the address, went over there, and signed up the job, and it all turned out well. So that was my first experience with acquisition.
So
first day, $7,000.
So I got to ask with that. So $7,000. What year was this roughly, to like paint some context? Because $7,000 on a replacement job today, not quite the same.
Yeah, it was 1986. Yeah, I was sporting a mullet. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Still, I gotta say that's like still one of my favorite hairstyles that you've ever had. But so back in the '80s, you acquire or you go find the death certificate. You get the number forwarded to you. You take on day and night's business.
I take on day and night's business, and that year we shot up. So it was me in a van. I got that. And then I started picking up more. And after the first year, I had 30 employees. Wow. Now, I didn't necessarily know how to run a business, but I'm telling you what I learned from this whole experience was, these databases and phone numbers are the shot in the arm that you really need to get started in business. Now, we're not talking about buying, mature companies and management teams and infrastructure and all that stuff. We're kind of talking about, how does a small guy get into the M&A business and start to learn it and cobble together companies and tuck in companies to build their own platform.
Well, let's touch on
that where we're focused?
Yeah. So if we can touch on that, I think that would be really good.
I think doing it in today's day and age, I had the benefit of Ken came to try to buy my business in the thriving metropolis of Fresno, California, a while ago. I think it was 5 years ago or something like that. And we were 12 million in revenue back then. And I spent the day with Ken and I had heard all these crazy, it was more about curiosity because I heard all these crazy stories about how Ken did this and Ken did that. And, a lot of people that were pissed off at Ken or whatever. I mean, I literally thought like Satan himself was coming to my office. And I just want to know what that was like. Turns out Ken's not Satan, and he's actually a pretty good guy. He lives 3 doors down from me now. But I was sitting there like a kid on Christmas morning, like hearing these stories and like writing down everything Ken said, literally writing them down. I was pulling out my phone and typing in my notes, that stuff. I got to find that note section. I don't know if I could remember that. But he said this story about the death certificate. And after that, how would I do that in today's day and age? And what I realized was, gosh, Google's got all these business listings. And so Josue was my marketing guy. He goes down and calls all of the businesses that we found on Google. And we're just desperately waiting for one that doesn't pick up. Because their listing is still there. They've got, reviews and stuff like that. They haven't been taken down yet. And then the funny thing is you can call the phone company and you can pick up those ones that are down for like $10 or a $20 fee.
And there's always business to be had off them.
Yeah.
I had at one time I hired a disabled woman. She was on disability, but she was very friendly, very aggressive, and very friendly. And so I said, "Hey, you're perfect for this job. I want you to go through the internet and every month call every company." And the disconnected phone numbers, call the phone company. Here's how you research what phone carrier owns that number, and then call that phone company and sweet talk them into getting the numbers, and I'll give you $2,000 per phone number. And so, at one time, this company that we built and sold in Las Vegas called Yes Air Conditioning Plumbing, we had 117 different phone numbers from different companies. Wow. That we had acquired over the years, and just every now and then you'd get someone call up and said, "Time to replace my unit." Your sticker was on our thermostat, for instance. Yeah, I've done all kinds of stuff like that. Another one that comes to mind, you asked about another story, was there was a company in Las Vegas here that went Chapter 11. It was called Economy Air. And they had a nice business. They had a nice residential business. But they, the name is what tipped you off why they wouldn't make it, because they didn't know how to charge properly. But anyway, it was a pretty good business. So they filed Chapter 11, and so I was talking to my lawyer, and I said, how do I get this company? And he just filed Chapter 11. He goes, well, that's really easy. He said, how about we petition the court to become the white knight? And I go, what's the white knight? He goes, white knight is a guy who comes in a bankruptcy and says, I'll save the company, and the judge may give you the company. Now, you still have to deal with the creditors, but, if we can work out the creditor deal, you might have something there. So I said, okay. I'm like 28, mullet, tech uniform. And so I go into court one day. I don't know what I'm doing. And he's with me. And he says, Your Honor, Mr. Goodrich would like to be the white knight in this case and consider him to take the debtors in possession. That when you go to Chapter 11, they call it debtor in possession. The vendors actually kind of own the business, have rights to the business. And so I knew a lot of the guys, and the judge said, well, okay, so what's your plan? What makes you think you can pull this out better than the guy who used to own it? I said, here's the experience I've had with my company, and I got in some challenges, and I pulled it out, and I put it back together, and here's my growth trajectory, and here's what I've done. I've talked to this vendor, and this vendor. They all agreed to work with me if I pulled it out of the bankruptcy, and we can, relieve the court from any more jurisdiction over this. I'll take it right now and pull it out of Chapter 11 and negotiate on my own with the vendors. And they asked the major vendors, if they'd approve. They'd approved it, and I walked out with the business for nothing that day.
Yeah.
And then I essentially made deals with the vendors and said things like, okay, you're my equipment vendor, and I owed you $57,000. I'd say, I'll pay you half payments over time, and then I will agree to buy from you for the next 2 to 3 years, and here's my estimated amount I'll buy. So I'll buy at least $500,000 of equipment from you over the next 3 years if you give up half this payment, right?
Yeah.
So I made
And they
deals
give
like
you
that.
better terms because you said they're going to pay it over time,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm. So there's all kinds of deals I've done like that, and I'll tell one last one, and then we can get off this topic. But this is my favorite one was, 2009, when the world was in free fall, right? The Great Recession. I called up Goodman, and there was this very large $200+ million residential new construction company in Sacramento that very well known. I'm not going to name the name, but they very well known. But I called the president of Goodman in 2009. I said, hey, I bet they owe you a lot of money right now. And he goes, great guess, Kreskin. I go, well, how about you introduce me to the owner, and let me see, maybe I could buy the service department. I'd like to buy the service department. Maybe I could do a deal and get you some money. He goes, I'll make it happen right now. So next thing I know, the next day I'm flying to Sacramento, and I'm meeting with this guy, and basically said, here's what I'd like to do. I mean, he had a fantastic business, 250,000 square feet of warehouse and, manufacturing. It was quite a incredible operation. And I said, look, here's what I want to do. He had on his books the year before, he did $4.5 million in service. On a $200 million new construction business, he did $4.5 million.
You have to try hard to do that little amount of service work off that.
So I said, I want to buy your name, your company name, because nobody cares, home builders don't care about your name. And you're obviously not in the service business. So you change your name. I'm going to buy your brand. I'm going to buy your URL. I'm going to buy your database. And I said, how many stickered thermostats do you believe you have out there? And he said, well, in the last 10 years, which I imagine that, they haven't been changed. We've installed over 600,000 air conditioners in the region. So
That's a lot.
I bought the name, the phone number, the database, the URL, and during the due diligence phase, I had guys come out and start interviewing people at like a little business hotel, and set up shop there and at that time we were using Successware, get the Successware started, got vans, got them wrapped, bought 30 vans immediately. And the guy that had the business actually let us operate out of his building for several years because he had some space, and we rented it from him. And,
This is in Sacramento, you said?
how we went to work. And we built, so I closed that day, or when we closed, I got a zip drive of the database, and that's all I got. It was $4.5 million.
Wow.
And we paid it back in 18 months.
Wow.
So you borrowed the money, the $4.5 million?
And so, that was a new construction database, which I've done a lot of those too.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. So, Tom, I got a question for you. Ken's obviously got some great stories on acquisitions. Is there any ones that you have done that particularly stand out for you?
Yeah, I mean, this is the one that Ken gets pissed about because we talked about it on stage a few times. We should talk about tuck-ins a little later. But
yeah.
And this one, it was a standalone. It was in Vegas. We had 3 companies out here. One was called ACLV, one was called Priority Service, and one was called Climate Control Experts. They're all losing money, and Jerry Finney was the great guy that connected all these together. At least he told me that Climate Control Experts was losing money. I said, okay, well I knew the owners of that, and they were a good PE firm that this is the one that wasn't performing, and then the other 2 Jerry owned, and so I talked to them and said, hey, I think I can help with this. They weren't in bankruptcy, but it was definitely a white knight kind of thing, like Ken talked about. And I said, look, if you guys give me your company, we'll give you back equity. I'll create a new company. I'll give you equity in my new company. And obviously I'll take some equity, and then I'll distribute equity to get a few key employees that we need to make this happen. Brent Buckley was one of them. Dennis Thompson was a GM. Yeah. Brent Buckley was a sales guy. Jerry Finney. All of them got equity. It was negative $1 million EBITDA that year with $11 million revenue. And that was in 2021. In 2022, we did $25 million in revenue with $6 million of EBITDA.
Yeah.
And then we sold it 4 months later. So we owned it for 16 months, flipped it. For NDA purposes, I can't say exactly the number, but if you have $6 million in profit, they pay a good amount for that these days. And
it was an adult number.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And the thing is, in this case, I got to give it to Ken. And Ken told me, he's like, you son of a bitch, you came into my backyard and did my deal. And the funny thing is that people called it a Ken Goodrich deal. And I couldn't deny it, because the reality is that I literally learned this stuff and these strategies from listening to these stories from Ken. It's like sitting around the fire when you're a kid, and Grandpa's telling the story. Sorry, Ken, I got to call you Grandpa. Anyway, he's only 20 years older than me.
He's still old enough to be your dad.
Yeah. Actually, that is true.
Yeah, but listen, here's the deal. Listen, I've told these stories to hundreds of people, thousands of people, but there's only been 1 or 2 who ever executed on it. So good for you, number one. So good for you, right? The falcon has heard the falconer. And then another thing that I want everybody to listen to. Here's the key point here. Those 3 companies, standing back from them in our industry, people would think, why would you get those piece of crap businesses? Because all 3 of them were just messes, right? Yeah. From the perception of the other contractors, it was just a mess. But, people ask me all the time, why'd you buy that one? Why'd you get that one? To me, if that phone is ringing and there's customers who want to buy something, from that phone number, it's a good business, right? That's how you need to look at it. Forget what they used to do or how they used to do installs. If their technicians had nose rings or whatever bias that you've come up with, forget all that stuff. You're there to acquire, grow your customer base rapidly and inexpensively. That's the game.
I think what I noticed with Ken with all of his stories is that, in any good real estate transaction, the really good ones are the ones where everyone else thinks it's garbage.
Yeah.
And you find some other way that if I added a bedroom in this, it's going to increase the value. If I change the tenants or I, made it commercial, got rezoned commercial or whatever, like I can make it make money. Well, then you can go in and get it for cheap because everyone thinks it's garbage. And then you turn around and make a bunch of money when you flip that. Yeah. Well, Ken finds these things that most people think are garbage. In this case, in the Vegas companies, everyone's like, oh, this is crap. It'll never work, blah, blah. And then you go and you figure out a way to flip it, and then you can make great money on it. It's hard to make money when you got a great running business with great profits and they want to get top dollar for it. Then, well, there's just not a lot of meat left on the bone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I know a little bit of that feeling.
Matt's been in one right now.
Yeah. I say a business partner of mine just acquired a residential new construction HVAC business. Again, with the same understanding that Ken just talked about, is that like there's tens, if not 100,000+ thermostats in our market with my company's name and phone number on them. And for me, that was just such a massive appeal as to why would I be willing to buy a new construction business? Well, because there was a service business there. We just needed to fix it and get it operating. So no, I very much appreciate the kind of the non-traditional approach that you guys are talking about, how you found deals, how you've made those partnerships.
I look at it like, first of all, most tuck-ins aren't making any money, as you know, right? So to try to value them on EBITDA is, negative EBITDA, then they would owe you money, right?
Just tell them I'll pay a 10x.
So I bought plenty of companies I bought plenty of companies over the years that were losing money, but I knew what lever to pull, and I could estimate, okay, if I buy it for this, I pull this lever, this lever. I know what my outcome's going to be in terms of additional revenue and profit and the value creation, and then I kind of base it on, how I can get to that place with the least amount of money. So that's one way. The other way is just plain, I say, okay, give me I'll look at a database or the transactions for the last 2 years, average for the last 2 years. I'll take out all the replacement sales and I'll say, okay, here's how many service calls that the probability that they can maintain for the year I take it, right? If I just kind of do what they did and keep the marketing up a little bit. So let's just say for this conversation, it's 5,000 calls, right? Then I cut it in half because there is something odd that goes on, and I haven't been able to figure it out, which is, customers feel betrayed when a business they liked and trust sold, and it's very difficult to get them to try to use the new owners, because it's like, well, you're the interloper, I don't want to use you. I would rather go try somebody completely new than somebody that has some sort of connection to the brand that I used to love. It's a weird phenomenon, human nature. So I just cut it in half just to be safe, right? And then I'll impute my metrics on those calls.
So when you talk about your metrics, what kind of specific metrics? Are we talking average tickets, closing percentage?
And let's just say, so you had 5,000 calls coming in, so you cut it in half here at 2,500.
2,500 calls, right? So then I'll apply my metrics, how many of those were maintenance calls, and I would apply basically it comes down to blended average ticket, right?
Okay.
On my maintenance and how much and my demand. And then I'll impute those numbers on and say, okay, with me getting half the calls, here's what my revenue is going to be, which is a pretty good bet, right? Mm-hmm. So it's a pretty safe bet.
And just to be clear, I've done, in Fresno alone, I counted them out the other day, I did like 14 tuck-ins. A bunch of little tiny things. Average right now we're retaining 80 to 85%. So if you cut 50%, you're safe.
You're
Like,
golden, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you're applying blended average ticket. You're getting your revenue. You know what your profit dollars are going to look like. Now with that,
and it's your average ticket though, right? Not the
Yes.
previous guy.
Yeah, my average
What you
ticket.
can
That's
do with
another
your
reason why you cut it in
processes.
half, because sometimes, like it always amazed me, like, everybody loves Jerry. We love Jerry, but, his company was what, AC4 less, right? Like he
Yeah.
was the least expensive
Guy in town. Yeah.
and, usually with the least expensive company comes the least
People that
the
were willing
cheapest
to pay.
customers, right?
Yes.
The funny thing is,
customers.
half of them would have paid whatever you asked for anyway. So that's why Ken's saying, look, I can cut it in half, still make money, because half of those customers are just going to pay whatever I
That's
want.
really the point, and that's what I tell my people every day. If they bought from you, they would have bought it for the right price too. They bought because they liked and trust you, not because it was so cheap. Especially if you cut them in half.
Ken was in my office in Fresno, and he's looking at these dashboards we got on the screen, right? And he sees that my average ticket's $12,000. And I say, yeah. And he's like, you are the highest in town. And that was $12,000. This is like 5 years ago. And maybe 6 years ago. I don't know. 2017-ish, 2016. And, oh, wow, that's 7 or 8 years ago. I'm getting old. You're getting old.
Yeah, you say as long as you're 2 days older.
He said, look, you're $12,000. I said, yeah. He said, if you're already the highest in town and they're willing to pay 12, they're willing to pay 14. And I said, huh. I just kind of stared at it. I thought, he's right. If I'm already the highest in town anyway, I'm not winning on price.
Yeah.
So if you're already not winning on price, you might as well get the price you need in order to make a profit.
Yeah.
And that really stuck with me, and we raised it. The crazy thing is, last month, we sold very little ductwork and that kind of stuff. We did a lot of inverter systems, a lot of high-end stuff, but just residential replacement in that same location that Ken was at in Fresno, their average ticket was $26,000.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's like, but we changed our mentality. And the average ticket of my competitors is like half that. Now, they're not selling the high-end equipment because they're afraid to offer it to the customer. They're afraid they want to make prejudgments about the customer, about, what they can and can't afford. And those customers, some of them just want the top-end stuff. They want that inverter system that, does X, Y, Z and does whatever. But anyway, bottom line is that a lot of times with these customers, I had a whole database of my own that I literally I just wasn't charging enough to pay for what I need to pay for, to give my employees the lives that they needed and everything else.
Yeah.
And, and he operates in California, the most difficult market to operate in the country. And in terms of, just the regulation around labor in our industry, and it's very difficult.
Well, the thing is that Ken told me this too. We're sitting there, and the funny thing is, Ken literally flies out to my office in his, private jet, and lands. I go pick him up in my beat up Ford F-150, and he's looking at buying the business. And the whole thing, I got like a free education while I was sitting there, just learning everything he was telling me. But we talked about, because our average household income in Fresno at the time was $55,000.
Yeah.
So when we say California, we're not talking LA or San Francisco. We're talking like farming town, middle of what Ken calls the armpit of California. And it's just not a very, pretty place, at least when people are comparing it to like San Diego or whatever. But it was my home, right? And Ken craps on it all the time, which is funny. But anyway, it was, so I'm sitting in Fresno and I'm telling myself, oh, we only have $55,000 average household income here. We're not like the high income areas. We're a farming town, blah, blah, blah. And Ken literally tells me, says, when are you going to, quit telling yourself these bullshit stories? And I'm like, well, I get all the regulation of California and I get none of the benefit of any of the high incomes or anything else. He's like, I don't want to hear it, He's like, just charge what you need to charge and make a profit. That's what it is. And I think at that point, when you stop telling yourself those stories, I think I saw a quote the other day. It says, the only thing standing between you and success is the bullshit stories you tell yourself on a daily basis. Yeah. And I'm like, you know what? That's right. I had to stop telling myself the stories and stop making excuses and stop saying it's not going to work in my market. It's not going to do this. It's not going to do that. And just do it. It's possible, just execute.
No, that's such a key component of, if we can think of how many reasons not to do something, well, you can always find a reason not to. But ultimately, if you're willing to take that chance and just go ahead and push, like great things will happen when you're willing to go out of your comfort zone just a little bit to make those decisions. It's like, yeah, I've been to Fresno quite a bit. I think when I got exposed to leads for the first time in Fresno, my mind was blown because I never would have imagined that type of an operation producing those type of numbers would be operating in that market. And so, your comment about, I can't do that in my market. I can't think of how many times that we probably heard that. I'm sure Ken, just forever, every time you acquire these businesses and, the common objections that come up. I'd actually like to hear a little bit about that. If you can touch base or tell us a little bit about through the acquisition process with some of the tuck-ins that you've done. If there's any advice that you can share to some of the people that are going to be watching this that are going to be potentially engaging in those type of acquisitions.
Well, it got to the place where we have a standard purchase agreement that we've worked out a lot of kinks on. But what I typically do is I'll go and I'll give 3 offers. It's a 3-offer letter of intent. So you can choose one of these 3 things, and I'll put whatever I want to really do in the middle. Because human nature, people usually pick what's in the middle.
Wait, are you just giving away like the secret on
which one to pick?
which one to pick right here?
Yeah.
Like, don't pick the middle one with Ken because it's the one that he wants the most.
The crazy thing is, Ken and I we've been on stage probably 4 or 5 times together. Tommy Mello interviewed us the other day. We did it at Pantheon last year. I've heard these stories at my office. I've heard these stories. We're sitting in my house right now doing this podcast, and I've never even heard I've heard like 2 or 3 things right now that are just brand new.
Yeah,
and it's
I haven't
this
heard
3
this
options
either.
thing. The funny thing is, I'm like, holy crap, he's offering 3 options like he would in a customer's home about like which air conditioner they want to buy or which faucet. And he's offering 3 options on his LOI. So like,
So-
I'm just like, it's running.
It just applies everywhere, right?
Yeah.
People like choices. So when you're making your 3 options on this, the middle one that you want, so can you talk a little bit about like how you would position those options? What are 1 and 3 looking like?
So I usually go in with, like, first of all, when you're running a small business, the golden rule is never run out of cash, right? So I always hoarded cash and tried to be very careful with my cash. So I didn't want to put a lot of money out doing these acquisitions. So the first one, I would say, okay, I'll do a all cash payment, but really cheap. Yeah. Like, all right, you don't want to carry me or anything like that. I'll just give you this chunk of money and see you later. So let's say for this conversation, the first one, and it's low. So the first one is like $50,000 at close, right? And then the second one would be, not the middle one, but the third one would be, I usually would go with a higher payment. So let me say, like maybe $150,000. I'd go from 50 cash to 150 with equal payments, no interest for this amount of time. Just start making payments.
Okay.
But it's 150. It's 3 times more, but it's overtime with no interest. And I learned the no interest thing a long time ago. I just decided I'm not paying interest, and they seem to be okay with it. I don't know.
That's great advice. I don't know how practical it's going to be for most people.
I've never
but,
paid interest.
Good for you.
I've never paid
impressive.
interest.
And then your middle offer is like,
The middle offer is I'll give you $25,000 down and 5% royalty of every dollar that we produce with your database over the first. I like to keep it like 18 months, maybe 24 months. Don't spread it out too far. But then you can show them your math on, let's look, here's my average ticket. Your average ticket was, your average demand ticket was, $1,200, and ours is $3,500. So, every time we run a demand call, this is the royalty payment you'll get.
you're going to get almost 3 times. So you're going to get like 15% of what you would have got instead of 5% of what I'm going to get.
And so, and then you just put it in your Service Titan or whatever your CRM is as that database as a marketing campaign. So it'll track those customers, and you run the report and you pay them.
So just a key point there, he's basically putting into ServerSite, and he's tracking that phone number as a marketing campaign. And so if you buy a company, we've done this a lot of times, bought a company called Marthadol, we've bought a company called Verns, but whatever, in our ServerSite account, in the case of this company Marthadol, it says Marthadol acquisition, and then it tracks all the revenue coming in. And with Marthadol, I paid a percentage of the revenue that came in to the guy that owned Marthadol Heating and Air. And then I actually gave him access to my ServerSite account. So every year he could go in and check, and we did it for 2 years. And he got a percentage both years, and he could look at like how much revenue came in, and he knew exactly how much was happening because anything that came in on that phone number, it would show up under that marketing campaign.
Nice.
By the way, when you get these databases, this is a little side note. You take the database to a direct mail house, and they will run what they call NCOA, National Change of Address, and they will give the database back to you with those people at their current addresses. And then you sort that for your city and say, okay, this is my database. And then you have a different method to contact those people, like, hey, remember, you used us at your former house.
So you said national change of address.
Yeah,
I haven't even heard of this either.
Yeah,
This is a new thing.
NCOA.
No, this is new for me too.
So you take the database and send it to them, and
I just call Ashley White via direct marketing here and say, here's my file, NCOA it. She'll run it through, clean it for you, sort it. Even give you, like, where you don't have phone numbers and email addresses, she'll get what she can. And so now you got a clean database that you can market to these people. And remember what you're buying here. You're buying the relationship.
Yeah.
So you're buying the brain cells of the customers that remember that brand name and hopefully a good experience, and say, okay, I'll go with these guys because they own that brand that I used to like, right?
Wow.
You're buying that. And so in many cases, you'll see, the average U.S. home turns over every 7 years to a new owner. So you got a database that you buy that's 30 years old. There's still a lot of potential in there for those people who have moved, and you can kind of resurrect the relationship. But you can resurrect the relationship a lot less expensive and more effectively than you can with, some marketing.
yeah.
Okay, so we've talked a little bit about the tuck-in.
Let me back up.
Okay.
Back to the whole pricing thing.
Yeah.
I just try to target a low cost per lead, like $50, $100.
Okay.
If I think I can eat off that database for 2-3 years, I might look at it like $50 a year, so $150, and that's how I kind of extrapolate what I think it's worth.
So you're basing value directly related to the database using your metrics of what you're going to be able to pull out of that. Okay. All right. So we've talked about some of the deals that you guys have done. We've talked a little bit about just right now in terms of like the offer. What are like some? I mean, you both in particular have done an extensive amount of acquisitions. If we had to look at it and say, what's like one piece of advice that you can give to somebody that is looking at growing their business through acquisition, what would you tell that guy?
I'd say don't be afraid to start one. Pick one that's cheap in the beginning. I had a business partner on the first one I did, and he was freaked out about it and wanted a bunch of due diligence and everything else for a $150,000 deal.
Yeah.
And I'm like, whatever. And we got through it, and we ended up selling off a lot of they had sheet metal equipment, all kinds of garbage. As soon as I bought the deal, I just called up the auction house and had them come do an auction at the guy's property. So I never had to move his junk or anything. They just sold it off right there.
Nice.
Trucks, everything. I didn't want any of it. And we ended up selling that stuff for $30,000. So I ended up getting it for net 120. And my business partner still freaked out. And 120K was a portion of our profit for the year. It wasn't huge. And I checked it after like a year and a half. It was only $1.3 million a year business. 300K was new construction, so we're getting rid of that right away. So it's only $1 million that I was expecting to pick up, maybe 850 if I apply the 85% rule, or 500K if you apply Ken's rule of 50%. And after a year and a half, I ran the numbers, and we had done like $2.5 million of revenue off that database.
That's
and $2.5 million of revenue for 120K expense was awesome. So as soon as I got that done and got through it, my confidence in doing this stuff skyrocketed. And so I think number one thing you can do is just get out there and do it, and don't be afraid of losing some money a little bit here and there, and like just don't do something dumb that's going to bankrupt yourself, especially on your first one.
Yeah.
Ken can take bigger swings because he's done this so many times. He knows the deals, he sees them inside and out, he sees around corners, and he's willing to just throw the money in and pull the trigger and make it happen. The next deals I did after that, I mean, it took a day, 2 days to like come up with a deal on how much I'd offer them, and then 7 days of diligence and we're done. Wow. You know, it wasn't a big deal, but that first one, it was scary.
I'm with you, and I like how you said it. You know, just start with some small ones and get some confidence going. But think about this. Like, you know, at the end of the day, I've never really been able to keep many of the people from these small businesses I've acquired because, you know, broken companies usually have broken people. And, you know, you come into a high accountability environment like the way I run my business, they're just not going to work. It's like it's like the frog in the boiling water thing, right? You know, they've been used to being so lax and so undisciplined and so poorly managed for so many years that there's just no way the day they step in our operation and we're measuring their performance every day and we're just training them and we have expectations of how they look and how they act, you know, it polarizes them. So I've never been able to keep any meaningful number of people in the business, here and there. But out of the hundreds and hundreds of businesses I bought, and the people that belong to them, you know, it's a handful that I've been able to keep. So at the end of the day, think about this. The only thing you're buying is this opportunity to market to these people and have a more effective marketing means. You have a reason to call them. I'm calling you and talking to you because I am interloping. Don't say that word, but I am now, you know, taking on the role of this guy that you used to like and trust, and I want you to like and trust me too. But that is a more powerful lever to pull in terms of conversion and sales than just, hey, look at my postcard or look at my landing page.
Yeah. Great. Gosh, well, thanks, Ken, for coming over. Ken lives 3 doors down. He literally walked over here this morning and sat down. Matt lives in Vegas too, and we had a great time. And really appreciate you. Hope you guys got some out of this. And we look forward, if it's before Pantheon 2024 right now, we'll see you at Pantheon.
Now, hold on. I want to tell you one last thing that I think is very important. Okay.
All right.
Let's do it. You only got 2 minutes before your next meeting. That's why I was trying to close it up.
So to the point, to your point earlier, you know, how do you get started or be afraid of this? I will say that over the time, I had found some pretty good mentors who had experience with it. The first guy I found, you know, was the guy with the Chapter 11, the lawyer, right? So he gave me a little confidence. And then as I moved on, I found this CPA out of Phoenix who had actually done a lot of M&A work, and he was, you know, not your typical mild-mannered accountant. You know, he was a very aggressive business guy, very successful himself, but, you know, he knew how to engineer a lot of deals too, and he taught me a lot as well. So find a mentor that's done a lot of this M&A work and, you know, get close to them and have a sounding board. That's going to really help you and build your confidence. But at the end of the day, you know, using this strategy, tuck-in strategies, and evolve to buying some more strategic, you know, to buy maybe other locations and other markets to add to your platform is a great way to grow. Most of our industry is ran by baby boomers, or, you know, we're all retiring now, and your guys' generation has a great opportunity to come and put some scale together very fast and change the complete complexion of the industry from this cottage industry, mom and pop business, to scaled multi-branch locations, regionally managed, and national companies.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, hopefully you can use your powers of editing to put the closing at the end. But thanks, everybody. See you at Pantheon.